Hello, we're live here this morning for the last Sunday Politics before polling day. It would be nice, wouldn't it, to stop the world while we assess the impact on our democracy of the terrible events of this last week. But this vote is probably the most important of our lifetime, and so we must press on and hear the final thoughts from both sides. For Remain, we have the UWE Vice-Chancellor Professor Steve West and the former Lib Dem MP Stephen Williams. For Leave, William Dartmouth, a UKIP MEP, and Christina Simmonds, a campaigner from Cheltenham. Good morning. Good morning. If it doesn't make your halt, they'll set it on you. Just have a look at some of the papers this morning. The Sunday Times has come out for Leave, the Observer, as you would expect, for Remain. Quite a varied pattern in the press. Right, let's talk to our guests. Stephen Williams, the tone of this campaign, first of all, you were an MP, you've been out of it now for a year. Why are people so angry, do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot at stake, and of course quite a lot of people who want Britain to leave the European Union have been clamouring for this moment in time for a very long time, and think this is their opportunity to drag Britain out of Europe and would say almost anything to get us to that destination. Voters are very frustrated, and I talked to a lot of people during the local elections and for the last month since the local elections, and they keep saying, why can't we just have a rational explanation of the facts? I don't know who to believe. You say one thing, the Leave people say another. Please, would someone give me impartial facts? And I think, hopefully, over the next 4 days, we'll get a far more rational and calm debate.
Yeah, it's apparently because there are no facts, really, or very few, because it's about what will happen in the future. I can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, nor can you or anybody else.
There are some facts. You know, when the Leave side says things like, we can't stop Turkey from joining the European Union, that is factually incorrect. So there have been some falsehoods in this campaign, and that is very disappointing. We can all have opinions, but facts should be sacred.
OK, let's go to William Dartmouth. William, the tone of this campaign has been pretty horrible at times,
yes,
hasn't it?
well, there's been far more heat than light, and the government, particularly, the government machine, has put forward this Project Fear. Just to correct Stephen on one thing, although it's true to say that the UK has a veto, it is government policy to admit Turkey, and it's Liberal Democrat policy to admit Turkey. I think it's a reckless policy, and I wish that wasn't the policy, but the fact of the matter is it is the policy, and in addition, Turkey is receiving about 900 million euros a year in pre-accession funding as a candidate country. So it's a legitimate concern to raise, and to poo-poo in the way they have is not really very helpful.
To suggest they might be here tomorrow, when in fact the process is
years
away.
Visa-free the next 6 months. Visa-free the next 6 months.
William,
but I mean, there's more heat. There's been more heat.
William, let me just read. You said that this Leave EU sent a tweet which they deleted after the Orlando shooting. It says, "Act now before we see an Orlando-style tragedy here before too long." I mean, can you associate yourself with that sort of stuff?
Well, I mean, clearly that's absolutely absurd. I have no contact with Leave EU, and I know nothing about it. What I would much prefer to discuss is just to point out that Australian wine is commonly on sale here. Chilean wine is on sale, and a country can have full access to the single market without being a member of the European Union.
I didn't ask you.
No, but that is what we should be talking about. We should also
about wine.
Well, it is commonly said. It is commonly said.
Okay.
It is commonly said that a country needs to be in the European Union to have access to the single market, and it just isn't true.
Okay.
And that is the sort of stuff we should be looking at trade statistics. That's what we should be looking at.
Okay. Let's bring in Professor Steve West. You're the head of the Vice Chancellor of UWE. You're an academic.
Yeah.
I hear you're a surgeon. You're the chair of the Southwest CBI and chair of the Academic Health Science Network. And you're a member of the Society of Merchant Venturers. Why do you think people aren't listening to the likes of you necessarily?
I'm not sure that that's true. I think they are listening. Certainly in the recent engagements that we've had at the Colston Hall and places like that, we've had absolute clarity in terms of what people are looking for. And what people are really saying is that actually the politicians are not doing themselves any favours from either side. There isn't coherence. There's a lot of fear being peddled on both sides of the equation, and people are just saying enough. And what's beginning to happen, I think, is people are turning their backs on it, and that's a really difficult place to go. I think the other thing that we've got to face up to is that young people, so the generations that are coming, the young people who are now in secondary school, in college and university, it's about their futures. And I'm afraid there are people who just are not listening to what they are saying.
Well, they may not vote. That's the thought, isn't it? They're not likely to vote.
If you switch them off, they won't vote, but I think there's been a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes to ensure that they are registered and they will vote. And frankly, they're not interested in whether or not you can have Australian wine. These are bigger stakes than that.
Okay. Christina, you're a business consultant, aren't you? And you've been out for years.
Yes, I have. I think that's probably true to say, because my concern is, I agree with what William said, I've agreed with what Steve said. There is too much angst, far more heat than light. And I think it's a really simple decision we all have to make. It's who is going to be answerable to us as the electorate following our decision to join further into Europe, because it will be further into Europe, or to take back control of our own country.
Okay, let me just put a general question out there to everybody. Is concern over wine or banana regulations or whatever it is that comes from the EU big enough to take a risk? Are there really fundamental principles at stake?
It's absolutely irrelevant in my view. This is about building futures, this is about providing opportunity, and it's also about building a world that understands itself and can create communities that are coherent. Being part of the EU is an important part of what we're trying to create for not just this generation, but for future generations.
Let me let you come back to this, William. He's saying it's not worth a candle, really. Why are you getting so hot?
Well, I'm certainly not getting hot. I'm actually remarkably cool. I'd like to put it around the other way. What I think the real issue is: do we want to continue to be an international, outward-looking country, or do we want to be subsumed as a province in a protectionist European superstate? A protectionist European superstate whose economic performance is absolutely dire. Now, you're talking about young people. Youth unemployment in this country is about 13.7%. Too high. It should be lower. But youth unemployment in Spain is about 40%. Youth unemployment in southern Italy is about coming up to 50%. And the fact of the matter is that the European Union project isn't working, and we should not be sucked into it, and we should be what we've always been, an international outward-looking country. That's what the issue is. Christina.
I would certainly agree we need to be more outward-looking. We have a Commonwealth which we've largely ignored over the last 40 years. There's a huge growth in the Commonwealth countries, in their economies. We are not seeing that in Europe.
But the most recent trade agreement that was signed off only last week by the European Union was with South Africa and all the African nations around it. So the European Union at the moment negotiates trade agreements with the rest of the world on our behalf, but negotiates from a position of strength. As the world's largest single market, 500 million people. We are stronger than the United States, the world's second largest single market on that basis. So by pooling our sovereignty with our fellow European neighbours, we are much stronger on the world stage and can be outward looking.
Okay, we'll come back to this in just a moment. Right, let's pick up our discussion here. Let me talk to the Remainers first of all. Immigration has been a huge part of this campaign. Is it perhaps that people like you have been politically correct, perhaps haven't allowed discussions about immigration, which has allowed the outers to make capital out of that? Steve. So you're both Steve, but let's start with you, Steve. Yeah.
I think let's deal with facts, and I think that's the starting place. So if we look at the UK, immigration is a positive in my view. We mentioned, just the video clip a few minutes ago was worrying about the NHS. The NHS would fall over if we didn't have the workforce that we've got, which is an incredibly diverse workforce. It requires people that have come across from other countries, and they are staffing the NHS.
Stop.
Well, some of it was going to be more and more difficult to ensure that we get the right workforce coming in alongside our homegrown workforce. And I think the UK is about 5% in terms of immigration. I don't see that as a big issue. I see that as something to celebrate and build on. Equally, our staff and students are also moving into Europe. So I don't see why we're making such a big thing of this.
Uncontrolled immigration?
Well, immigration into the UK is about 50-50 from the rest of the European Union and the rest of the world. The rest of the world immigration is what is completely under the control of the UK Home Office. And I used to deal with quite a lot of those immigration cases as a Member of Parliament for a cosmopolitan seat like Bristol West. I don't think people are that troubled about immigration from the rest of Europe. No one has ever complained to me about there are too many French people in London or too many Polish people in Bristol. That simply hasn't come up as an issue.
So what are you saying then, that the people are more concerned about people who come from outside the EU?
If you scratch the surface of when people talk about immigration, you'll find there are far more deeper cultural issues that people are actually
Are you
concerned with.
suggesting that there's some sort of racism there?
There's some latent racism in some of it. And I have to say, you started off with the tone of the debate when we started this discussion. The UKIP poster that was put up last Thursday with a queue of Syrian refugees, I think it was in between Croatia and Slovenia, was straight out of the 1930s when Jews were vilified that way, and that was shameful.
I've spoken to William about that. But Christina, you work in HR, don't you?
I do, very much so.
Do you accept that without a stream of foreign workers, then lots of business would be stuffed, quite frankly?
I think that one of the things that we do need is to have the right skills here, the right skills balance. And I think that a managed system of immigration, such as the Australian point system, would allow us to choose those people we need to come to this country. And certainly we wouldn't be throwing out doctors, nurses, teachers, others who are here already.
But even if there was zero immigration from the rest of the EU, there's still 180,000 coming from outside of the EU. So what difference is it going to make, unless you're really going to slash those numbers? William, let's have you.
Well, I mean, that is actually a matter which you actually had to ask a member of the government. But the very simple point, which I've always found astonishing in this discussion, is this: if there are labour shortages, they can be filled in a very specific way. Years and years ago, I qualified as a chartered accountant, and I worked for 2 years in the Middle East as a chartered accountant on a 2-year contract because there was a shortage of accountants. When my contract was over, I had to come home unless it was being renewed. Now we can perfectly well fill shortages, skilled or unskilled, without without having complete freedom of movement for 450 million people.
Okay,
that's the point.
It's not about shortages, it's about opportunities, isn't it? It's that people from Bristol and the West Country have the opportunity to go and work in Paris, Warsaw, Lisbon, wherever it is. It's a two-way thing.
Not many go to Romania.
Not many go to Romania.
No, but
Steve,
a lot go to
let-
France and Germany.
Wear your Chamber of Commerce hat now. Tell me why he's wrong.
Well, what we're seeing through surveys that we've just recently completed in the southwest, and I'll keep it specific to the southwest and this particular region, over 700 responses, 63% were firmly, and these are big companies, small companies, all sorts of difference in terms of their style. They're saying they need to remain in, they need to remain competitive, and also to get skilled workforce. And every survey identifies skills shortages, no matter what industry we're talking about.
Well, how does that work with the weight of immigration control falling on non-EU immigration? So Indian engineers, cancer surgeons and the like find it very difficult to come here, whereas completely unskilled people from Romania, Slovenia, Slovakia and the rest are able to come here as of
Let
right.
Stephen Williams field that one.
People from the rest of the European Union can only come here if they've actually got a job to
That's
fill.
completely untrue. There's 77,000 people who came on the off chance.
It's
just
a
untrue.
great,
Sir, I'm afraid.
It's a great myth to say that people from the European Union come here, steal jobs, get benefits, and the single market and freedom of movement of people doesn't work that way. You have to be searching for work and to have a job when you get here.
So you can't come to this country without having a job lined up?
No, or within 6 months have to find one. You have to support yourself in that period. There's no recourse to the state at all. But the Bristol economy is strengthened by this. If you go to the Airbus industries on the northern fringe of Bristol, or indeed to the universities, the research labs at our 3 great universities in this area, a lot of those programs would collapse without skilled engineers and scientists from all over the most prosperous place in Europe.
Stephen says, Stephen says he's never had a constituent come up to him and saying, sorry, there's too many French people in Bristol, or there's too many Germans in the West Country.
I agree with you entirely. I've never had anybody talk to me about there are too many people of a particular kind.
So what's the problem?
The people that are, the numbers of people coming here are simply overwhelming. And we actually do need to be able to determine those people that come here, those people who have the right to stay here, rather than have it dictated to us en bloc by the European Union.
It's interesting though, but I was in further down in the southwest last weekend, and a lot of leave posters up there in places where there is almost no immigration. Can you explain that?
easily people want to leave for a variety of reasons. It's not just immigration. Polarising it around immigration is quite wrong. It's a lot of things. The things that William talks about in terms of trade and our ability to trade with the rest of the world. But primarily, it's about having politicians we can kick out if we don't actually like what they're doing.
You can vote out William Dartmouth for a start. He's an elected
we
member of the
obviously
European
could vote you out too. However,
You don't need to tell him that.
the point
He knows.
is that we can't change the dynamic in this country without having control of who our politicians are, and that 70% of our laws are not made in Brussels.
I'm
because
sorry,
all people in
I
Parliament
haven't
do
been
is
a member of
nothing
the
but
European Parliament, but I was a member of the Westminster Parliament for 10 years. Most of the laws in Great Britain are made by elected members of Parliament and unelected members of the House of Lords. So our country isn't that democratic either. It's a great myth to say that laws are imposed on us. I was a member of the Council of Ministers
Well,
as well.
the Ports Directive for a start,
So-
which just threatens 9,000 jobs in Bristol
So the
ports.
European Parliament, which you're elected to, sir, and the Council of Ministers, who are national government representatives, they're the people who make the laws across the European Union.
Sadly, we have less than 10% of MEPs, which means that we can't block anything. But
just to get back to what you said earlier,
you were rather implying that out of the 620,000 people who came to the UK last year, they were all aeronautical engineers. Well,
No,
please, that's really not the case.
Of course they're not. And many of
But that
them
was
are
the
actually-
implication.
Many of them are not necessarily at that level of professional skill. A lot of them are actually running and supporting people in care homes, in hospitals. They're keeping our universities going in terms of cleaners. There's a whole raft of people out there who are doing a fantastic job that actually we cannot find to employ any other way.
All right.
Yeah, but you don't have to have the doors completely open to fill it up.
Folks, we have to leave it there. Because that's it from the West this week. Who knows who will be on our programme next Sunday? That will be for you to decide on Thursday. My thanks to my guests. Let's return to Andrew in London. Bye-bye.